My stepdad loves to say real men use their hands, but I guess real men also use every towel in the house trying to stop a flood they caused themselves. That man mocked me for months until the sink called his bluff. I don't know why this still gets under my skin, but here I am, typing it out while listening to the hum of our box fan drying the soaked kitchen tiles. I'm 24, work from home as a freelance illustrator, and live with my mom and stepdad, Brian. My real dad passed when I was 13, and while Brian didn't come into the picture until I was nearly out of high school, he sure walked in like he owned the place. You know the type, firm handshake, constant need to mention back in my day, and a condescending chuckle that makes you want to glue his socks together. At first, we got along. I didn't expect him to be my dad or anything. He was just mom's new guy, and we both pretended that was good enough. But over time, something shifted. Maybe it was that I didn't go into construction like he did. Maybe it was because I don't change my own oil, or because I have soft hands from hours sketching rather than hauling drywall. Whatever the reason, Brian started taking little jabs at me whenever he had the chance. You ever try using a hammer instead of a mouse? Back when men knew how to fix things. Even stuff like, must be nice to sit in your room all day. Try lifting a toolbox sometime. Always with that smug smirk. I brushed it off at first. My mom told me not to take it personally, he's just old school, she'd say. But it wasn't harmless. It was constant. He made sure I heard it loud and clear. In his eyes, I wasn't a real man. Now, I don't consider myself fragile or anything. I can carry groceries, mow the lawn, I even built my own desk. But no matter what I did, it wasn't enough to meet Brian's caveman criteria. If I washed the car, I should have rotated the tires too. If I cleaned the gutters, I should have rebuilt the roof. That's just how he talks, always comparing, always diminishing. The worst was when something broke in the house. A pipe under the kitchen sink had been leaking for months. I told Mom about it. Even showed her the water damage building up under the cabinet. She sighed and said, I'll ask Brian to look at it. Of course, nothing happened. When I brought it up again a week later, Brian chimed in with, that's what happens when you buy cheap plumbing. You wouldn't understand, it's not a digital issue. And he laughed like he'd just performed at the Apollo. I let it go. Until last Friday. We were all sitting down to dinner. Mom made meatloaf, Brian's favorite, when he started up again. Out of nowhere, he says, you know, if that sink keeps leaking, I'll have to fix it myself. Can't expect MouseClick over here to crawl under a cabinet. I snapped my head up. Why haven't you fixed it yet? I asked, not angry, just done. He raised his eyebrows. Why haven't you? Because I'm not the one who pretends to be a handyman around here. It was like the air got sucked out of the room. Mom froze with her fork midair. Brian stared at me like I just challenged him to a duel. You want to go there? He said, voice tight. All right, let's see what you've got. Since you're so smart, why don't you fix it? I pushed my chair back. No, I said. You're the real man, remember? Go ahead. Show me how it's done. And that's when the kitchen turned into a live episode of This Old House, Disaster Edition. Brian stood up like he was preparing for battle. He even cracked his knuckles like he was about to arm wrestle the sink into submission. My mom muttered something about not starting anything and started clearing the dishes, but Brian just waved her off like a wrestler approaching the ring. You want to see what a real man does? He said, already headed to the garage. I'll fix it right now. I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. I was angry, yeah, but more than that, I was curious. I wanted to see this. I wanted him to feel that same squirmy discomfort I felt every time he said something backhanded in front of my mom, or when he's joked that he should start charging me rent because he does all the fixing around here. Brian came back 5 minutes later with a toolbox that looked like it had been passed down from Abraham Lincoln. Rusty edges, duct-taped handle, filled with half-used caulk tubes and pliers that hadn't closed properly since 2004. He dropped it on the kitchen floor with a satisfying clang and looked at me like he'd just pulled Excalibur from the stone. I'll have this done in 10 minutes, he said. You might want to take notes. He knelt down, opened the cabinet, and took one look at the pipes before grunting like a caveman examining fire for the first time. Yep, just needs tightening. Whoever installed this was an idiot. I almost laughed. You're about to find out who the idiot is, Brian. I didn't say it, but I thought it real hard. He started yanking on the pipes like they owed him money. There wasn't even a plan, just brute force, twisting things that probably shouldn't be twisted, knocking over the bucket I'd placed there weeks ago to catch the leak. Water splashed onto the bottom of the cabinet. He didn't even flinch. Mom poked her head in. Are you sure you should be doing this without turning off the water? Brian waved her off again. It's fine, I've done this a dozen times. Lie. I knew it was a lie. Brian had once bragged about fixing a garbage disposal that turned out to be unplugged. He kept fiddling with the P-trap, I think that's what it's called, and then, without warning, there was a loud pop followed by the sound of rushing water. Not a gentle trickle. A blast. I watched it happen in slow motion. Water gushed out like a faucet turned full blast, shooting across the cabinet and onto the floor. It drenched Brian's shirt instantly. He yelled and jumped back, hitting his head on the countertop. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" he shouted, scrambling to find the shutoff valve, which he'd conveniently forgotten to locate before starting this DIY disaster. I was the one who finally reached under the sink and twisted the valve shut. By then, the water had spread across the floor, pooling near the fridge and soaking into the edge of the hallway carpet. Mom grabbed towels from the laundry room and tossed them onto the floor, her expression somewhere between panic and "I told you so." Brian sat on the tile, dripping wet, pants clinging to him, hair stuck to his forehead like he'd just been baptized in stupidity. I could have said a lot right then. Could have asked, "That what real men do?" Could have offered to call a real plumber. Could have laughed. But I didn't. I just looked at him and said, "10 minutes, huh?" He didn't respond. Just sat there staring at the broken pipe like it had betrayed him. The next 2 hours were spent cleaning up the mess. I mopped while Brian sat on the patio, sulking. Mom didn't say much either. She just gave me a tired glance every so often like she didn't know whose side to be on. And maybe she didn't. She always tried to play peacekeeper, but peacekeeping only works when both sides respect each other. Brian had spent the last 2 years talking down to me, and tonight the sink gave him the slap I couldn't. When everything was dry and the water was safely off, Brian walked back in. He was still damp, his pride even wetter than his clothes. I expected another jab, some kind of joke to save face. Instead, he just grumbled, "I'll call someone in the morning." That was it. Not an apology. Not a thank you. Just a quiet admission that he couldn't fix it. It should have been satisfying. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was tired. That night, I went to bed thinking about all the times he made me feel small, like I was less than because I used my head instead of my hands. And now? The man who claimed he could fix anything had flooded the kitchen trying to prove a point. And failed. But that wasn't the end. No, the best part came the next morning. The morning after the great kitchen flood, I came downstairs expecting to find Brian already calling a plumber. Instead, he was standing at the kitchen island, arms crossed, staring at the sink like it had personally insulted him. The soggy towels from last night were piled in the laundry basket, still dripping. The bottom cabinet doors were open, revealing the twisted pipes and evidence of his attempted plumbing surgery. The floor still had streaks of dampness despite my mopping. Mom was quietly making coffee like this was just another Sunday. "You call someone?" I asked, not even trying to hide the edge in my voice. Brian didn't look at me. "I will. Just looking at the damage first." He was stalling. I could tell. Probably hoping there was a magical fix that would let him restore his manhood without having to admit defeat. But that pipe was done. It was mangled like a soda can someone stepped on. One of the fittings was cracked clean through. The shutoff valve was rusted in place and barely holding. We needed a real plumber. I pulled my phone out and said, "I know a guy. Want me to call him?" Brian hesitated, then shrugged, which I took as a yes. The plumber, Dave, showed up around 11:30. Nice guy, mid-40s, toolbox in one hand, coffee in the other. He gave me a nod when I let him in and I showed him to the sink. Brian stayed in the background like a kid who broke the TV and is now watching the repair guy with his hands in his pockets. Dave knelt down and gave a low whistle. Yikes. Someone had fun with this. Brian cleared his throat. The pipe was already leaking. I just tried to tighten it up. Dave gave him a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, you tightened it all right?" I stepped into the hallway, gave them space, but I could still hear the occasional mutter. "Who used pliers on a compression fitting?" "Oh no. No. You don't ever pull on that part." "Geez, this whole connection's gonna need to be redone." It took Dave about an hour to replace the busted pipe, replace the ruined valve, and patch the surrounding cabinet bottom with a waterproof seal. It wasn't cheap work, and I knew it wouldn't be. When he stood up, wiping his hands, he gave Brian the invoice. $289.50, Dave said casually. "Includes parts, labor, and the emergency patch. If you'd waited much longer, you'd be looking at mold remediation." Brian blinked. $289? "Yep. You're lucky it didn't reach the drywall." Brian's mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but instead he just sighed and pulled out his wallet. He handed over his card and Dave ran it through his little phone reader. "Receipt to your email or phone?" Dave asked. Brian pointed at me. "Send it to him." I raised an eyebrow. "Why me?" "So we have it on file," he muttered. "Right? We. Once Dave left, silence settled in like fog. Brian sat down at the table with a grunt. Mom set a cup of coffee in front of him and one in front of me. No one spoke for a moment. I could have let it go. Could have been gracious. Could have said, "Good try," or "Thanks for trying." But then Brian muttered something under his breath. "What was that?" I asked. He looked up. "Nothing." "No, seriously. You said something." He frowned. "I just said, plumber's overcharge. I could have done that myself if I had the right tools." I stared at him. My jaw tensed. "No, Brian. You couldn't. You didn't even know where the shutoff valve was." He pushed back his chair, clearly irritated. "I don't see the point of rubbing it in. You think I wanted to flood the kitchen?" I stood up too. "No, but you sure wanted to make a show of it. Every time something breaks around here, you act like I'm useless because I don't have calluses on my hands. You treat me like I'm less of a man because I use a stylus instead of a wrench. And yesterday? That was your big moment. And it exploded in your face. Literally." He looked at Mom like she was supposed to save him. She didn't. She just stared down at her coffee. "Real men," I continued, "don't run their mouths and then leave other people to clean up their mistakes. You talk like you've built houses with your bare hands, but you couldn't even handle a plastic pipe without flooding half the kitchen." Brian stood up, towering over me. "Watch it." But I didn't flinch. "No. You watch it." And I walked out. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding. It wasn't just about the sink. It never was. It was years of little jabs, snide remarks, and side eyes that finally overflowed like the water in that cabinet. Later that afternoon, Mom knocked gently on my door. "He's quiet now," she said softly. I think maybe he heard you." I nodded, but I wasn't celebrating. I didn't want to win. I just wanted to stop feeling like I had to prove myself in my own home. That night, Brian didn't come down for dinner. Mom and I ate quietly. The kitchen was dry. The new pipe held. And the silence? It was the most peaceful thing I'd heard in years. For 3 days after the kitchen flood, Brian didn't say a word to me. No sarcastic comments, no backhanded jabs, just pure, heavy silence. You'd think I'd enjoy it, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting for a storm to return. Mom tried to keep the house running like normal. She'd ask how my work was going in her overly cheerful voice while sneaking glances between us at dinner, like hoping no one would throw a fork. On the 4th morning, I came downstairs for coffee and found Brian already at the kitchen table, arms folded like he was waiting for a meeting that had been called without my knowledge. "Sit," he said, not looking at me. I didn't sit, just stared. He let out a slow breath. "I messed up." That caught me off guard. "I wasn't trying to help," he admitted. "I was trying to prove something." Still no eye contact. Just words like bricks dropping between us. "I've always worked with my hands. It's what I know. I guess I thought that's what made a man." He finally looked at me. You do stuff I don't get. You draw for a living. You're smart. And you're good at it." I didn't speak. I was letting it settle. "My cousin was like that," he went on. "He was a graphic designer. Whole family mocked him, said he was soft." I laughed too. "He died in a motorcycle crash. Never got to prove them wrong. Maybe I've been carrying the guilt and throwing it at you." Then, softer, "I'm sorry." I finally sat down. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I just want respect." "You have it," he said quietly. "You should have had it all along." Then he muttered, "Still think I could have fixed that pipe if I had the right wrench." I rolled my eyes. But I laughed. For the first time in a long time, I laughed. Later that week, something unexpected happened. I was working in my room when Brian knocked. A knock. Not a yell, not a passive-aggressive comment. A knock. He stepped in, holding a wooden frame. Inside was a printed version of one of my old digital illustrations, a golden sunset over a mountain range. He'd printed it out, framed it himself, even varnished it. "Saw it on your site," he said awkwardly. "Figured it should hang somewhere other than a screen." I stared at it, stunned. "Took me a couple tries. Messed up the first one," he added. "Used birch. Had to look up how to miter the corners. It smelled like fresh wood and effort." "Thanks," I said. "It's really good." "Don't tell your mom," he said, grinning. "But I might have cried when I ruined the first one." We both laughed. Things didn't become perfect after that. Brian didn't suddenly trade his hammer for a stylus or stop watching cable news at full volume. But something shifted. He asked questions about my work. He even watched me sketch once, genuinely curious. He still didn't understand it, but he tried. One night I came home late and heard him on the phone in the garage. "Yeah, the pipe's fixed. Cost me a couple $100. "Nah, I didn't do it myself, hired a pro. Kid told me to." He was right. He paused. "My stepson? He's got hands too. Just different tools." I stood there for a moment, smiling at the door, before quietly walking away. Just when things started to feel almost normal, the past knocked on our door. Literally. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unusually quiet. I was on a Zoom call with a client, halfway through explaining the difference between mid-century modern and farmhouse chic when I saw Mom walk past my room, eyebrows furrowed. The doorbell had rung once, no follow-up knock, no aggressive pounding, just one soft chime that somehow felt familiar. A minute later, she knocked on my door. "Hey," she said softly. "It's your dad's brother, Rick." I froze. Uncle Rick? I hadn't seen him in years. Not since the funeral. He and my dad had been close, like real brothers, not just by blood. After Dad passed, Rick showed up for maybe a month. Took me to lunch twice. Sent me a birthday card the year after. Then he faded. Life got busy. People stopped checking in. Grief separated us all into private corners. I came out to the living room to find him standing there in a windbreaker, holding a manila envelope and looking like someone who'd driven too far with a thought he wasn't sure he should act on. He gave me a tired smile. "Hey, kid." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, still stunned. Brian stood in the kitchen, arms crossed but saying nothing. "I was in town," Rick said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't want to just keep thinking about it. Figured I should come see you. Say hi." Mom stepped in gently. "Can I get you some coffee or?" No, I'm good," he said. Then turned to me. "Can we talk?" We sat on the back porch. The air was crisp. Rick pulled out a folded piece of paper from the envelope and handed it to me. "I've been holding on to this," he said. "Didn't know if it'd matter. But your dad would have wanted you to have it." It was a letter. Handwritten. In my dad's scratchy, slanted style. The ink had faded a little and the creases suggested it had been opened and refolded more than once. I recognized his handwriting instantly, how the tails of his Y's swooped too low, how he never dotted his I's until the end. I didn't read it right away. I held it like it might disintegrate in my hands. Rick cleared his throat. "He wrote that when you were about 15. Gave it to me in case anything happened to him. Told me not to give it to you right away, said you'd know when the time was right." A lump caught in my throat. "Why now?" I asked. He looked down. "Because when I saw that sink story you posted about the flood, the fix, and how you handled it, I thought that kid's not a kid anymore. You turned out good. And maybe I didn't do my part." I blinked. "Wait, you read that?" He chuckled. "Yeah, your mom shared it on Facebook. You'd be surprised how many old guys scroll at night." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I finally unfolded the letter, careful not to tear the brittle paper. It began. "If you're reading this, I guess I'm not around. And that sucks. I wanted to be there for everything, your first car, your first heartbreak, the day you got your dream job. I hope I was for as much as I could be." The words blurred. I skimmed ahead, my heart beating louder than the wind. "You don't have to be like me to be a man. You don't have to fix engines or build fences. I used my hands. Maybe you'll use your head. Maybe both. Whatever tools you've got, use them with purpose." I wiped my face before Rick could see. He gave me a look, quiet, understanding. He was proud of you. Even back then. Back inside, Brian was sitting at the table again. Still watching. Still silent. Rick turned to him as he stood to leave. "Thanks for letting me stop by." Brian just nodded. No handshake. But no scowl either. After Rick left, I walked to my room and taped the letter inside my closet door, my own kind of reminder. That night at dinner, Brian did something that caught me off guard. He looked up halfway through his meatloaf and said, "What your uncle said about being proud?" He cleared his throat. "I get it now." Then went back to eating like he hadn't just dropped a brick on the table. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Sometimes a man doesn't need to say much when he's finally learning to listen. A week after Rick's visit, things in the house felt different. Not in a huge fireworks in the sky kind of way. But there was a subtle shift, like someone had adjusted the frame and suddenly everything hung straighter. Brian still made his coffee the same way. Still wore his ratty old flannel like it was stitched from patriotism. But he didn't talk over me anymore. He didn't grunt at my schedule or scoff when I said I had a deadline. He stopped acting like the sound of a keyboard was a threat to his masculinity. And he started knocking before coming into rooms. That might sound small, but for a guy like Brian, it was practically groundbreaking. One night, I was finishing a client design, a branding package for a fitness studio, when Brian knocked on my door holding a cardboard box. "Found some stuff in the garage," he said. "Figured it was time to clean out the old tool bench." I looked inside. It was full of random odds and ends, old bolts, a cracked tape measure, even a faded photo of him and my mom from when they first started dating. But tucked between the mess was something else. A little wooden sign. It was dusty, edges chipped, but the letters were burned in deep. Measure twice, cut once. I raised an eyebrow. My old man gave me that when I was your age, Brian said. Back when I was learning carpentry. He thought it was about wood. But maybe it's about people too. He scratched the back of his neck, suddenly awkward. Anyway, thought maybe you'd want to hang it in here. You measure things pretty well. I took the sign from him carefully, like it might crack if I held it wrong. Thanks, I said. And I meant it. That same week, my mom found me in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. She was making pancakes, her peace offering breakfast, and humming quietly to herself. You've been calmer lately, she said without turning around. I guess I am. I see the way Brian watches you when you're sketching on your iPad now. He doesn't understand it, but he's trying. Yeah, I said. He is. She flipped a pancake and gave me a soft smile. He told me last night he thinks he might be too old to start over, but not too old to start adjusting. It wasn't much, but it was something. Later that day, Brian and I ended up in the garage together. I was helping Mom hang some lights on the back patio and she'd asked us both to check the outlets. While I was untangling the string lights, Brian held up a multimeter with a puzzled look. You ever use one of these? I looked up. Yeah, once. You checking voltage? He blinked. You know what that is? I grinned. Brian, I'm not made of tofu. He barked out a laugh. A real one. Loud and unfiltered. All right, he said, handing it to me. Show me. And just like that, we weren't stepson and stepdad trying to outman each other. We were two people in the garage figuring things out. The real full-circle moment came a month later. I got invited to speak at a local high school for their career day. A teacher who followed my art account asked if I'd talk to the kids about digital careers, graphic design, freelancing, creative tech. I wasn't sure I had much to offer, but I said yes. The night before, I was practicing my notes at the kitchen table. Brian came in with his usual mug of evening tea, another recent change, and hovered for a second. You nervous? He asked. A little, I admitted. Never talked in front of a group before. He pulled out a chair. Sat down across from me. Well, he said, you built your life with your own tools. Nothing more manly than that. I stared at him. He didn't even flinch. And just like that, the definition shifted. It wasn't about who could fix the sink or lift the heaviest box. It wasn't about dirt under your fingernails or grease on your jeans. It was about showing up, owning your faults, and giving respect where it's due. The next morning, I walked into that high school and gave the talk. I showed the kids my process, told them how I turned drawing superheroes as a kid into designing full branding packages for real companies. I told them they didn't have to fit into one kind of box. I ended the talk with something I hadn't planned. Real men, real people don't all use the same tools. Some of us use hammers. Some of us use styluses. Some use words. What matters is how you build. When I got home, Brian was in the living room cleaning up his tools. How'd it go? He asked. I smiled. Measured twice. Cut once. He nodded like that was all he needed to hear.